Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Mary Starks. I am the program director for our Pacific Oaks College Bachelor's in Social Work Program Administrative Faculty. And we are happy that all of you guys have joined us today. But before I get started, I want to bring up our president for Pacific Oaks College. And after Dr. Padutton speak, then we will go into the introductions of everyone who contributed to this event today and move into our discussion. And so again, I am excited that you guys have joined us today. Thank you very much. And I would like to bring up Dr. Padutton.
Thank you so much, Dr. Starks, and welcome everyone to Pacific Oaks Anti-Bias Seminar Series. This is part 4, actually, of what we have done for the community. This is a good conversation that we have just to keep social justice moving. Pacific Oaks has been doing this for the last 75 years. We are not doing this because there was an incident that triggered us to do that. We must continue to call for social justice and support, giving second chances for these kids. I wanted to learn from everyone in this room, of course, wanted to learn from the speaker as well. But learning is one part of the intention of this seminar. I think the important part is learning and acting, which we together can move these so important issues. So really, please pay very close attention. Please stay connected. Please talk to one another more so we can continue to advance this very important issue. I'm going to leave the rest of the time for the learning and the forum of it. Let me pass it back to Dr. Starks, who will be introducing our speakers today. Welcome once again. Happy Friday.
Thank you, Dr. Padutton. And before I bring up our speakers, I want to acknowledge those who actually helped put this event together. Today's Anti-Bias Education Symposium is presented by the Pacific Oaks College School of Professional and Family Psychology, Bachelor's of Social Work, and Community Psychology program. Along with, I would like to just acknowledge a few, some folks, Joanna, who is the PO Associate VP for Advancement and External Relations here at PO, Amber Wright, PO Manager and Development and Alumni Relations. Also have Dr. Sandy Howard, who is our PO Core Faculty for our Bachelor's of Social Work program. Davion Swan, our PO Adjunct Faculty for the Community Family Psychology program. We have Shalik Nichols from our Pacific Oaks San Jose campus, and who is also a program manager at the location and adjunct faculty. As well as, we really crossed all departments and programs here. We have Miss Jolie Selton. She is our student worker from our MFT program. And aside from that, I don't want to leave out anybody else. I have to bring back my number one partner in this event is Cherie Balecki, who is the core faculty and coordinator of the community psychology program. And our moderator today is Dr. Giovanni. Dr. Gio, I'm going to read his bio. Pronouns are he, him, and his, and he graduated with a PhD in Latinx Studies and American History with an emphasis on critical race theory from UC Irvine. He is currently part of the Faculty of Ethnic Studies at Cypress College, lecturer in History, Asian and Asian American Studies, and the Honors College at UCLA. He's also an adjunct professor here at Pacific Oaks College as well. Now, before I get started, I want to acknowledge our guest speakers, Ms. Tiffany Johnson and Joe Paul, who is with us today. And it's been an honor watching them really advocate and do a lot of social justice work and criminal justice reform. And I want to really thank the both of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gio, who is going to introduce our guest speakers and move into the discussion. So, Dr. Gio?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. How you doing? I'm hoping you're doing well. Many blessings, of course, many blessings for everyone. And it is an honor, it is a true honor to be part of this major event. And I know this is one event of many. And I do want to commemorate a couple things before I introduce these incredible speakers for us today. And that is, of course, a land acknowledgement, thinking about our Native American brothers and sisters who also comprise California, especially in Southern California, and as much as all parts of California. So we just want to give thanks, but we also want to give acknowledgement to the struggles, the resistance, as much as the survival of Native American community. And with that, I do want to introduce, I will start with Tiffany, if that's okay. And I will like to comment that Tiffany Johnson, a Black woman who survived a horrible traumatic life abuses or a series of life abuses, which ultimately led to 16 years of incarceration that has affected her family, her community, and society. And in this context of how this happened, Tiffany walked the grounds of two of the largest prisons in California, the Valley State Prison and Central California Women's Facility, while serving a 15-2 life sentence. On April 28th, 2010, she walked through the prison gates to start her new life. Through guidance and connections, she went on to claim a career through advocacy and organizing, learning how to use the very traumas that she fought to survive, and will always be the voice of change to help create change by way of life experience. As a non-traditional subject matter expert of the effect of trauma, Tiffany seeks to provide a platform focusing on supporting people through the life traumatic experiences and guiding them to freedom. Tiffany has completed numerous presentations throughout the country and offers a unique perspective on the intricacies of overcoming reentry and trauma barriers after years of incarceration. I'd like to welcome, please, Tiffany Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
And allow me to please also introduce Joe Paul, otherwise known as Joseph Paul, or Elder Joe Paul, who is a seasoned reentry professional with over 27 years of community service working with ex-offenders, high-risk adults in various community development and faith-based organizations. Currently, Joseph serves as a managing director of the Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership. Prior to joining the LARRP, Joseph served as the administrator of vocational and workforce development services for Shields for families, overseeing multiple government-funded reentry programs for the agency. Joseph previously contributed to the development of the highly successful Back on Track program, which is an LA County reentry collaboration launched by then California Attorney General Kamala Harris out of her DR3 office to address recidivism in our state. As a program coordinator of New Start, LA Reentry Programs, Joseph was a key figure in the success of the City of LA Workforce Development Collaborative, which provided employment, preparation, mental health services, and related resources to those seeking employment upon parole from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Please join me in welcoming Elder Joe or Joseph Paul.
Hi, glad to be here.
It is a pleasure. And want to say thank you everybody for joining, of course, and joining this incredible conversation. I do want to kick this off with something that was ruminating, right prior to entering into this particular conversation. I realize you do have a set of questions that you were forwarded to ruminate prior to this conversation, but the idea of giving, right? The idea of being selfless, that notion that 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 we think about that essence of humanity. And I want your thoughts on that, right? Because being authentic, being, displaying that bona fide affection for community, I want to hear, when you hear those words, what comes to mind, right? What's sort of an impetus into this particular venture that both of you have taken on, please? And we can start with Tiffany, if that's okay, if you don't mind.
Renewed living, that's one of the things that sticks out in my mind. I'm not sure I captured your entire question, but the fact of the matter is that I appreciate the conversations that we're having around the criminal justice system and illuminating them in various different ways, right? I think this is a very important conversation to have. I know that it's a conversation that we've been having many decades now on different levels, and a lot of changes are coming, but there's still some things that need to be unveiled. And so I'm hoping that this is part of a conversation that will lead to the unveiling.
Thank you, Tiffany. Elder Joe, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I appreciate you kind of hearing my heart earlier. I kind of get the gist of where the question popped up from. But I would say this, one of the most fundamental ideas as a global society is do unto others as you would have done unto yourself, period. And I think that's such a foreign notion in terms of even folks that are in positions of leadership in whatever way their responsibilities would bear. And I don't think that it's intentional. I don't think that it's something that people insidiously kind of intend to step into, becoming more self-interested or even almost cynical. I think it's just a part of the territory in the way our society is set up. I heard a term, I read a term out of a book that I'm into right now, and it said, it talked about democratic capitalism, right? That's kind of paradoxical. It really is. But I think it speaks to your question. If we can get to a point where in a society like America, where cash rules everything around me and interests are more important than lives, getting to a point of a really inclusive perspective where every voice matters, particularly the voices of those who are furthest away from power, puts us in a place where change is really possible, where hope and change is possible. And, just by reason of the number of people that I'm seeing participating in this particular conversation, it shows me that there are people out in the world that still do put others first and are seeking curiously how to answer questions in their kind of idiosyncratic space or their unique space in their communities or in their institutions and so forth. So, I do hope, to your question, that as a result of our conversation today, we inspire people to believe that it's okay to want to see somebody else do well just as much as we want to see ourselves.
And I think that's on both your responses, right? That's an excellent way to think about it. The series of readings, right, from a psychological point of view, from a historical point of view, from an ethnic studies point of view, whether we're talking about Michelle Alexander's work, or we're talking about the recent publications of, well, not too recent, but Caste, right? The way in which, we envision our society and how it's laid out, or we're thinking about Angela Davis's comments, right? And, this whole concept, right? This whole connection in terms of how do we become that individual? How do we become that society? How do we become that community? I think that lays very much root in terms of the structure and your approach in your particular avenues, right? So I want to backtrack a little bit if it's okay. I just really need to get personally that off immediately. But I do want to, for folks who may not be familiar with either of you, sort of to basically backtrack, and if it's okay with you, to share a little bit about your past and of course your present advocacy work in the criminal justice reform. So perhaps I can start with Tiffany, if that's okay.
Okay, good timing. The ice cream truck just went by, so you guys won't hear that. So I I love the fact that you asked that question because so many people in society now ask that question. What's your background, right? In the criminal justice system, what's your background to get into this door and get into that door? So I started back in as a child, right? As a child, I experienced numerous amount of trauma, and I guess we can get into them later. But you know, the ACEs project that's out there, out of the number of 10, I'm probably a 9, right, of the experience of childhood trauma. And not even realizing that I was going through the trauma at the time, right? I grew up in a one-parent household, my mother was on drugs, the typical life, right, of in the Black community, the typical life in the Black community, that with drugs and alcohol and abuse and all of these things, which was normal, was normal. Um, Years later, I blacked out a lot of the trauma that was inflicted on me. And I guess I was walking around in a shell, right? And I walked around in that shell for many years. And as the trauma started to surface, because when you're traumatized, your mind kind of like protects you in a way that helps you survive, right? And it resurfaced, right? The resurfacing led me to go to prison. I did 16 years, um, did a horrible crime. I did a horrible crime, right? However, it, it, it taught me while I was in there that I had an opportunity to either run from it, succumb to it, or better myself from it, right? And I chose to better myself. I went and asked him the question on how did I become here, right? How did I get here? Not the crime, you know, but how did I get here? What led me there? And as I asked myself that question, I began to look around the thousands of women that I was locked up with. You know, how did we get here? You know, and it was a long journey. 16 years in incarceration in another culture is traumatic upon itself, right? But I was fortunate enough to get out and come into a program, and a program that literally took me and supported me in so many different ways that helped to ground me, helped to teach me that the work that I did inside of prison, I was advocating. The work that I did on me, I was organizing and helping with folks, right? And how to use your voice. And so this a new way of life introduced me to so many different organizing and self-reflection and self-guidance and motivation. And I became an advocate, and now I became an advocate in a new way of life. I eventually, like 5 years later, was co-director over a new way of life. As I constantly seek to find who I am, I keep striving, and so I now work for Christ Center Ministry under Troy Vaughn tutelage, which is a wonderful organization, and I just keep striving and I keep going, and here I am today. 11 years out of being in prison. And I never would have thought, but it was because of the support and the network that is around.
Absolutely. And I know, you know, I've had a chance to do my own homework, right, on both of you, to understand the multifaceted layers, right, that have presented themselves in front of you. And it's you know, I mean, it's this journey, right, this journey that you speak of, this journey that's taken you post 10 years, post decade here, and looking back, right, and thinking about this, and perhaps that's another question we can ask later, right, in terms of the reflection. And so if I can also include Elder Joe into this conversation, same question.
Yeah, Tiff, it's always just heartwarming to hear you speak again. I just feel your passion every single time. So thank you. Uh, you know, E22842, let's start there. California state prisoner, convicted June 22nd, 1989 of voluntary manslaughter and possession of a firearm. 7 years at that point in time, and I got off lucky. my crimey, my co-defendant, got 15 to life for the actual second-degree murder, who we advocated for after 27 years because he was tried as a juvenile and convicted as an adult. We were able to adjudicate him out through Prop 60, AB 260 and AB 261, trying juveniles as adults, prior to them becoming full mature to responsibilities and rationales and so forth. So he's home now, and he was actually one of my staff people while I was at Shields doing that work that you referenced in my bio. But that journey from that incident, a man died, and sitting in county jail at court in 1988, prior to just acquiescing to the plea bargain, I made a decision in whichever way it went, whether I got life in prison or whether I, got some kind of easier sentence, if you will. I realized that we can never replace that man's life that was taken. And regardless of what I became, he would never had a chance to actualize his potential. And so I made it a point at that point in time to say that I'm going to live my life where this man's life was a seed that was sown that's going to bear a whole lot of fruit. And I never gave up on that determination since 1988 to this day. Right now, I've lived every single day of my life to be of service to people. And I think that, sometimes out of the most horrific circumstances, even as Tiffany was sharing her story, that God allows us to find our truest self. It's almost like looking in the mirror, as Michael Jackson would say, and really making determinations against who you've identified yourself with and tried to, morph into, whether you call it peer pressure or whatever you want to label it, to find yourself. And so prison really became a proving ground for me distinguishing who I was versus who I was trying to be. And obviously being in prison, you're around folks that either you with that life or you not with that life. And there's no escaping that when you're in prison, level 4 yards, level 3 yards, where it's fully active and everything that happens in prison is happening. And back when I was in jail, they didn't have sensitive need yards. They didn't have, these outcomes that could take you out of the mainstay. You was either with the business or you wasn't. And I found a way to navigate through all of that and maintain my integrity and maintain the good name that I'd established and be respected. And I'll think about one particular incident, in custody that really was a prover for me. It was at Mule Creek State Prison. It was level 3-4 yard. And there was a gentleman who was down for about 11 years. He was from East Coast Crip. I'm not going to say which faction of the East Coast he was from. Somebody might know this dude. But anyway, it came to me when we were locking up to do count time and said he wanted to talk to me. And I was like, man, I don't know why you want to talk to me. Yeah, we don't have nothing in common. I've never really had no words with you. Why you want to talk to me? It's like, I just need to holler at you. So, walk the child with me when we break out. So I'm in the cell and I'm panicking. Like, are these dudes about to try to extort me? Are they going to press me? Like, is this about to be some of that prison stuff that I had only read about, right? Because I had never experienced it up to that point. And so he came back over to the cell when it was time to go eat. And I was like, man, I'm going to eat in the cell. I'm about to do my little spread up in here. I'm not going to even go to child tonight. He's like, man, you better get out of here. Come on. So I walked with him and I knew who he was. I knew his reputation. And so my first assumption was, here go the BS. And lo and behold, this dude said, I've been seeing your walk. I've been seeing you do your thing on the yard. He said, I want you to pray for my mom. I don't want my mother to die while I'm in here. And I still got a few more years. So would you pray for my moms? And I was like, what? Man, we could pray right here in line. And he was like, no, don't do that. Just pray for my mom, please. And the Lord was gracious. And I'm just believing that the intercession that we lifted up was enough to help his mother recover. And he really made my life a whole lot easier on the yard as a result of that experience we had together. And then, the rest is history in terms of getting out and making some moves as far as what I'm making.
And one of the things that I noticed, I'm sorry to cut you off for 2 seconds here, is, and this also, Tiffany, perhaps maybe this is also part of your experience, is we're thinking about how, religion, and I'm going to guess Christianity, right, or at least a facet of it, just using spirituality, for lack of better words, I think.
Yeah.
And thinking about the ways in which this serves as an influence, a medium. It's nothing new, right? This is something that reflects through the history of the Black Panther Party, right? And using many members like Malcolm X's transformation, for example, right? With using Islam. But that connection, right? That connection, that the spiritual connection to be able to think about humanity on a different level. I know religion gets a bad rap, right, every now and then. But I think one of the things that I would want folks to understand is that, it's not just in the eye of the beholder. It's also the effect it has on communities, right? The ability it has on the communities to be able to get communities together. And it has the ability to be able to bring folks to a very different, you can call it ethos, mindset, partaking, but it does have a different value system, right? And it's not just, top down, right? For instance.
Let me add something to that, and then we can move on. I'm sure time is of the essence, but I will say this in regards to, and I like your terminology as far as spirituality. I think it universalizes the idea. What we have is either the confinement and disparity of a history that may be fully traumatized, as Tiffany was sharing, or you have the optimism of a hopeful future that faith is required to believe in, to give you that optimism, to take the past and make the most out of. And I think that's where spirituality has its most beneficial impact for people who, can't change where they come from and can't change their life experiences up to the point they're having that moment of reckoning.
Well, let me add this also, just kind of moving on to another question, of course, if that's okay with everyone, is, thinking about behind the scenes, right? No one knows until you're there, right? No one knows behind walls, behind the, that particular, the establishment of the system, which kind of echoes in my mind, Michel Foucault, like the invisibility of violence, right? You don't know unless you've gone through it. But at the same time, this element here where speaking to that firsthand experience, right? Speaking to that firsthand experience, I guess the question is, and I'm going to direct this to Tiffany, please, what are the needs of individuals transitioning from the prison system? And let me repeat that again. What are the needs of individuals transitioning from the prison system? So if I can ask Tiffany to mark on that.
It's many needs, right? And so we know that the basic needs are the housing component, right? Some supportive housing. We know that education, we know that jobs, we know that clothing. Those are the basic needs that we should all know that a human being deserves to have, right? The core needs of someone who is transitioning from incarceration back out into society is that emotional, supportive, spiritual, understanding need, right? So one of the things that I know for me, when I came out, I felt like I needed to prove to society that I'm just like them, right? Even though I've been gone a while and I'm learning all this new technology, I'm learning all these new things, but I don't want nobody to know that I'm going through this, right? That I'm scared. I'm scared. So one of the core things is understanding that people are scared to come out, right? We already know that there's so many barriers that are coming up against somebody who's been through this system, education, housing, employment, all these things, right? Credit and everything if you've been through the system. But what about understanding a person who can't even go into a grocery store, who can't know how to turn on a shower and are embarrassed that they lost this ability, right? Because in prison, as I said earlier, it's a whole nother culture. It's a culture, it's a society in there, right? And we had to learn the society in order to survive, right? Joe Paul put it excellent, right? You don't you got to learn where to move at, right? You got to know who to be around. You don't know what is going to happen, and so when we come back out here, we're putting on a front that says, okay, yes, I am willing to get my education. Yes, I am willing to get my job because these are the things I know I need to get on my feet. But is anybody going to help me with understanding that when I go into the grocery store and the thousands of choices that they have on the shelf for one item, and use the example of ketchup, and I don't know how to choose in the panic attacks that I'm going to have, and I just go out the store, period, because I don't understand? Or is anybody going to help me with the fact that I'm so programmed and used to being locked down at a certain hour every day for 16 years, and I come out here and I have this freedom that I do not know what to do with, but I still self-lock myself up? These are the things that society, our community really need to know. I know there's a lot of people and a lot of organizations doing great work out there and providing those basic needs. Those basic needs are fundamental to us. But how do we get to people and say, I really understand what you're going through? Because let me tell you what I've been through. Let me tell you what I'm still dealing with right now, right? 11 years out, there's so many things that I'm still working on. You know, on the outside, people think I got it together. I've been a director, I've been an advocate, I speak my mind, I found my voice, and I'm very strong and I'm very passionate about what I do. But behind my closed doors is another thing, is another area that society and community don't nobody get to see, right? And so if we don't talk about it, most folks don't want to talk about it because they're going to get judged, or they have that fear of being judged, right? So how do we get them to understand that we're not judging them? We want to know, right? It takes people who've been through it, Joe Paul, myself, and many, many, many others who are utilizing our voices and who are saying, brother and sister who've been incarcerated, look, I don't like it either, but this is what we need to do to build each other up, lift each other up, hold each other up, right? And that's just a small portion of the needs.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much, of course, right? Again, and I know Elder Joe's ready to go, right? Go for it.
I would add this, Tiffany, and I appreciate your candor. I've coined it in this way. Some people need to be rehabilitated, but others need to be habilitated. To somebody means you're bringing them back to a state that pre-existed whatever the condition that's being treated. But what are you bringing them back to? An antisocial setting? What if your mama was a gangbanger? What if your daddy was a gangbanger? What if everybody in your household socked people in the face on the strength of disrespect every time they got out of line? And that's what you know is a diplomatic conversation, right? That's what you know. So if that's the case, and then all of a sudden you have this sanction based on a court of law that disproportionately impacted you on top of it with enhancements and all the other things that create these draconian sentences on people, right? Now you got bitterness underneath all of that and resentment and animosity, and you still don't have any real pro-social skills on top of it. You're learning it in prison from a group of people who are, in Tiffany's words, created their own society, and now you're the best inmate, but you ain't the best citizen. And you get out here and you got to try to function in some feigned sense of who you're supposed to be. Oh, and mind you, I forgot to even include this. So many of our folks are functionally illiterate. So now, I got to read everything and ain't nobody answering the phone. I got to push a button for somebody to respond on customer service. And I don't want to do all this. So I'm a checkout, right? And so, yeah, help comes in a lot of different forms. And I think, when we speak about cultural competency, that's a real thing we got to lift up in a way that is culturally relevant, right, to the people we're talking about. So to Tiff's point, housing, employment, health care, child care and family reunification, if that's the case, mental health supports are all critically important. But I think the biggest thing that can be extended to someone is a sense of inclusion and acceptance as an underlier to all those other social supports that people need coming out of custody.
But I also think, Joe Paul, you mentioned mental health support, and that's like a broad conversation there, right? Because mental health support in my community, in my family structure, mental health, that means you crazy. You know, what the hell? I'm not going to go get no mental health support. What do that even look like, right? And so just the encouragement and reframing it to the a community that have been taught that you don't go tell your business to nobody. I don't care who they are, right? That's the mental health. Oh, you mental health, that means you're crazy. All this stuff. And no, that just means something happened to you, right? And if we want to look at mental health, then really start looking at the traumas that are associated with the mental health. Where did that come from? How did it develop, right? It takes years and years and years to teach somebody something, and it takes years and years and years to traumatize somebody. And it's not going to take a few months or a couple of years just to destigmatize or help somebody through their stuff. You come out of prison, you see psychiatrists while you're in there, it's phony. And let me say why it's phony, because we're going to tell you what we need to tell you just to get out of there, right? We're not going to give you the real. And so you come out here, you don't trust nobody. They're talking about you need some mental health, and it's a good way, don't get me wrong, I understand it is very much needed, but how do we get people to trust it? How do we get people to trust it when they have trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, and they're only just trying to survive, right? And I think this is like the one of the platforms that we're saying, okay, we do see that what you're going through, we do understand what you're going through, and we're trying to figure out how it is that we're best can suit up for you. What is it that you need, not what is it that we're telling you you need.
I mean, just to chime in, just hearing this, and of course, my brown brothers and sisters too, the idea of trauma as much as access to mental health is still stigmatized, very stigmatized. And there's a thread there, right? There's a common thread here, without a doubt. So, it also makes me think of a couple other things, right? So multifaceted trauma as much as multifaceted justice, which I'm thinking if we're the concept of reintegration, right? The concept of reentry, right? The concept of inclusion, right? Even inclusion. If that's painted in a way where now you're adding on top a new challenge, and that is of survival in the outside sphere, how does that not reflected in terms of what is supposed to mean in terms of integration, right? How is that supposed to actually manifest itself? And one of the things that I also wanted to bring to light was one program that I had a chance to speak with, but also, it always reminds me every time in LA, of course, around Twin Towers, around Chinatown, and that, of course, is Homeboy Industries. I wanted your thoughts on that. I wanted your thoughts on Father Greg Boyle's work, or I wanted your thoughts on what do you think if you're familiar with the program, and just in general, right? What are your thoughts on their engagement, I guess, with community as much as reentry? So.
Joe Paul, take the floor.
Yeah, I mean, Father G is an amazing human being, period. I mean, what he's done is a true demonstration to the very first question you asked, Dr. Gio, and that is about generosity and human service. Father G epitomized that to a group of folks that were ostracized and misunderstood as far as the Mexican community, and I would even venture to say the Latin community in general in East LA or Heights area, where he dealt with gang members, and he really allowed the misdirected passion that these folks was functioning in to be plugged into something more constructive. And this old white guy or young guy, when he started, really showed up with a sense of compassion and understanding without necessarily trying to proselytize or move people into a particular direction under his worldview. He just loved people. And once you do that, I mean, the human inclination is communal, right? The human inclination is that we're in a tribe. And unfortunately, again, to the point that was lifted in the last question, when people understand the world the way they understand it, they act out that way, regardless if it fits into the dominant culture's perspective or not, right? So we bang, or we sell drugs, or this is what we do. To be given an opportunity by someone who is representative of the dominant culture, which Father G in this case would have represented that, and being able to say, no, you matter to us. And we're going to begin to create this pipeline of introducing you into a world that allows for your gifts and talents to be valid in this mainstream portion of society. And where they didn't fit in, he created pathways for them to fit in. And that's the remarkable thing about America, right? You can start off with nothing today and end up with everything tomorrow. And I think that's one of the unique things that Father G did. And now you have this global phenomenon of Homeboy Industries that has absolutely served its community well, and it's become a total model of how communities and enclaves within communities can actually do the work to change lives without being some major institution.
Yeah, I agree. Inclusion, right? I think that's in humanity, we all just want to be included, right? We want to feel a part of, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be loved, we want to be accepted. And I think that Homeboys and Father Greg and his, not only in his leadership, but in his following, right? In his following, his higher power, him following his heart, right? And being able to look at somebody and not see what the world see, but see the inside, see the spirit, see the heart, see the gift of that person, right? And people coming out of the system, we're just people. We're just people who committed a crime for one reason or another, ended up in the system for one reason or another. But when it all boils down, we're still part of humanity, right? And we want to feel loved and we want to be seen. And so letting someone know that you can see them and not really focus on their mistakes, their past, that is a great uplifter, a booster. It helps to tear down the walls that they built up for protecting themselves. Because what you don't know is a lot of the things that are happening, with the individual and the things that we think or we deem is bad. It's a fear mechanism. They're striving, right? And so, how do we get people to understand that I see you? No judgment. And with the women that I work with, right? I work with women coming through reentry, and it's phenomenal. They walk through my doors. I don't know what they've done in their past. I leave it up to them to tell me, right? I sit down and I share with them and I talk to them and I let them be heard, right? And being heard, being seen is part of inclusion, right? And when you can get that, then we can start a momentum, and then we can really find out what that person, what this community really needs and want, and then how do we help get it for them, and not even get it for them, give them the tools because they got the skills. We got skills, y'all. We got skills. We're all do, right? God gifted us in all kinds of ways, right? And so how do we nurture somebody to find their God-given talent and whatever that is for them, right? And that's how we rebuild communities. That's how we tear down systems.
You
That's how
know,
we include folks.
I really like that concept, right? The inclusion concept and the ICU, right? And I think Professor Cherie mentioned that as well. It reminds me very clearly in terms of one of my favorite writers, psychiatrist Frantz Fanon. And I really get emotional, but at the same time, I recognize the importance in this. And one of the things I remember Fanon talking about in his discourse was being able to see people as human beings. And that's your starting point. That is your number one. Because if I see you as a human and you see me as a human, then there's no way to explain any of the isms, any of the repressions, anything, because you and I see each other as equals. And if we had that philosophy, right, and our understanding here in this conversation here built into the greater society, then there would be, no, there would be every sense to understand this is inclusion, right? There's no that automatic prejudice that comes with whatever media or whatever's been sold to legitimize hierarchy or to legitimize any sense of disempowerment of community. And while I'm thinking about this, I'm also thinking about one more aspect to connect the higher education component, right? To think about that. And this is a question that basically goes, what role does higher ed institutions have in the criminal justice reform and transforming reentry? So let me say that one more time. What role does higher education institutions have in criminal justice reform and transforming reentry? I'm curious about your thoughts on
that. Let me lean in, Tiff. So what I hear in that, what I think first and foremost is the canvas of the mind that is left to the circumstances that are just traditional or historical in people's communities, especially in impoverished communities. When you can interrupt that experience as this is all I know through higher education, through formal education in any particular way, let alone even higher education, you begin to transform people's whole opinion. I'm self-educated. I got a high school diploma from Crenshaw High School. I grew up in the rolling 60s. Like, it was violent where I grew up, and it still is to this very day. And it was books, it was seeking, it was curiosity, it was mentors that would come around and make references and suggestions to help me understand why I saw the world the way I did, although I was confined to the resources that I had at a particular time. And so books and the ability to have healthy debate on ideas and the contrasting or even dialectical experience that came out of that was transformative for me. And growing and then sharing out that information that impacted me and seeing other people's response to it. I think higher education is the game changer, because you take that blank slate that has been, marred by social experiences in most instances with the folks we deal with, and then giving them the ability to wash that board clean, minus the resources of resiliency that they pulled out of survival, and being able to turn that through to something constructive and abstract and critical in thinking, and taking that aggression and that resentment and that frustration of the world and being able now to make sense out of it. I think about, and I want to say it's Abraham Maslow. He talked about, he's this human motivational, psychologist, the hierarchy of needs and all that. He talks about despair being defined as suffering minus meaning. And so when you can add meaning to the despair, whether it's through an academic trajectory or just through, a self-directed educational pedagogy, if you will, it puts you in a place where life has more meaning. You begin to become more empathetic, sympathetic. You become more understanding. You become more inclusive to other people. And so, yeah, higher education plays a critical role in life change.
Tiffany, please.
I agree. I agree. But I also have to admit that I personally haven't sought higher education yet, right? And I've done this time. I graduated high school, right? I got a GED. I got my high school diploma. I got a CA. I had a CA license. My biggest dream in life was to be a surgical nurse. I wanted to go to the highest of my ability. Prison sidetracked me, and in coming out, have I educated myself on life? Yes. I've educated myself on how to find my voice. I've educated myself on different policies, not just by myself, but with the help of other policies and understanding the criminal justice system. I've educated myself in that world. But as far as me going back to higher education, I have to admit that's fearful for me, right? But for those of them who are, and I know many of them who are, my hat's off to them because I know what a feat it is in being told no all the time, right? I would love to be a therapist. I'm really good, right? I'm a great thinker. I figure stuff out. I can do anything I want to do, and I know this about myself. But the childhood trauma that always told me that you're not good enough, you can't do this, you won't be good for this, you won't do this, you'll never make it here, you'll always be that, it still looms, right? And so that's part of the daily interacting, coming back into the society that we need. That's the unseen stuff, right? That's that fear. And yes, I know if I go, it's going to be a challenge here, and I got to jump hurdles and do all of this stuff. And if you knew me on a personal level, you'll say, yeah, girl, you're going to do it, right? Because whenever I put my mind to anything, I can do anything. However, that trauma, right? And so higher education is a must. It is a must. And the more we do it, the better we get. You know, the more we do it, the better our community becomes, and humanity wins.
Let me just highlight a couple of points here, because yeah, you know, I mean, there's always different forms of education. It's one of the things that many of us tell our students in the classrooms is that while we give tools, right, tools for learning, this is not the only space, right? This is not the only space of understanding and learning. I've learned as much speaking to farm workers in Central California as I have being in the university system. And so there are many different ways to engage this higher education, which is still to a certain extent privileged, right? There's still a sense of privilege within accessing higher ed, you know, cost, right? But I do believe there was a comment about the imposter syndrome, right? Not feeling good enough, or even if you do make it, right, that you feel like, well, I just, you know, cheated my way through, right? And no one's noticed yet, right? But we know this is also part of that. And whether it's, you know, within the structures of the incarceration and prison system, or wanting to access this, right, and wanting to access the education system, it's really telling in terms of the eras in which all of us are coming out of, and what exactly are we truly learning, right? And how is that motivating to building our community? And as just one, it's Morena that put this in here, that the capital, right, reentry capital, placing this in as an understanding of our access to this. So, so I want to leave maybe a couple minutes for transitional time. I think, Mary, I'm not sure if that's the right term, or if there are, maybe if we can, I don't know. Sometimes I like doing this even in my own classes. Is that you know, can you give me one word, right, to summarize how you feel, right, at this point in your life? If there's one word, sometimes it could be two, right? I don't want to place a structuralist image on this. What would that be? What word would that be? Or words? I'm sorry.
And Joe Paul, you gonna leave me to go first, huh?
You can give Tiffany more than one word.
I said words. I apologize.
All right, we can give Tiffany, we're going to give you a little bit more because you got me going.
I feel powerful. I feel energized. I feel revitalated, right? I feel that I can overcome a lot, but I also fear that I'm seen, I'm heard. And so that right there, I'm seen and I'm heard, right? It's powerful within itself.
And I will sum it up in one word. Now, I feel optimistic. Or I'll add one more. I feel hopeful. I feel optimistic and hopeful.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. Thank you very much for this incredible conversation. And before I venture off, right, to other obligations, of course, I want to say thank you to everybody. And it is a pleasure. Love to connect with both of you further, if that's possible. And more than anything, blessings to everyone. Amen to everyone. And let's of course move our conversation forward. So thank you, and
Thank you,
blessed
Dr.
Friday,
Gio.
and good or evenings, right, or afternoons, wherever you are. So thank you.